Hi everyone, today I will be talking about Labrador Inuit and will walk through some of the major aspects that Inuit identity embodies. To begin, Labrador Inuit refer to the descendants of Thule people. Thule people are ancestors to modern-day Inuit groups and have historically taken up the majority of the Atlantic coast in northern Labrador. There are 5 major Inuit settlements in this region. These include Nain, Hopedale, Postville, Makovic, and Regolet. There are also people referred to as settlers found in this region who are the descendants of families with Inuit white marriage. They are generally not considered Inuit and have had greater exposure to the ways of life in European Canadian societies. Weather is extremely unpredictable in this region due to global warming. Labrador Inuit have been greatly impacted by the thinning ice conditions. One of the main forms of subsistence in this region is seal hunting. However, seals are constantly breaking through the ice, affecting the ability for Inuit to hunt seals. Ice is also used as a highway system to connect communities in the winter season. However, the thinning ice is posing extreme difficulties for Labrador Inuit to make trips to cabins and visit lands nearby. This has impacted Labrador Inuit in several different ways, including mentally, physically, culturally, and spiritually. Understanding the geographical aspect of northern Labrador helps us appreciate the cultures that exist in the region. By learning about the unpredictable weather, we can gain an appreciation for the difficulties that Labrador Inuit face with unstable conditions. We further learn about land identity, resource availability, and how these aspects affect Labrador Inuit. Labrador Inuit live on treaty land. This was declared by the Labrador Inuit Land Claims Agreement signed by the Inuit of Labrador, the province, and Canada, effective on December 1, 2005. Section 2.18 of the agreement states that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms applies to Inuit government in respect of all matters within its authority. Now that we have a basic foundation of Labrador Inuit, it is insightful to understand their own culture and religious practices. Labrador Inuit follow centralized religious beliefs and are connected to powerful mythology and spiritual beliefs. This includes a world full of giants, guardian spirits, animal spirits, dwarves, and other forms of mythology. Shamans were central figures who released their guardian spirits to heal the ill, increase hunting victories, and manage the weather. However, when the Moravian missionaries, the first Europeans to settle in Labrador communities, were introduced in the late 1700s, their traditional beliefs were fully eradicated and soon all Inuit were converted to Christianity. Colonization has major impacts on Indigenous communities, and it's important to understand the effects on the culture, people, and everyday practices. Similar to several other Indigenous communities, colonization resulted in assimilation of Labrador Inuit. After the Moravian missionaries were introduced, the lives of Labrador Inuit changed drastically. Labrador Inuit share a common language with Inuit in other regions. Inuktitut was the primary Indigenous language spoken in the Canadian Arctic region. However, since the 1950s, Labrador Inuit have been immersed in European and Canadian ways, with the result of English and French replacing Inuktitut as the primary Inuit language. Before contact with the Europeans, Labrador Inuit had little to no formal education. All methods and ways of life were learned from ancestors or families. This changed after the 1950s when Inuit acclimated to a European Canadian society, leading to the introduction of compulsory education through the form of residential schools. Through learning about Indigenous communities, we have identified that due to systemic racism and a lack of education, many Indigenous people struggle to find employment. Labrador Inuit had employment opportunities, however, they were restricted to jobs in the natural resource sector, reflecting limited opportunities in the region. The main form of subsistence for Labrador Inuit was hunter-gatherers, specifically the hunting of sea mammals on the coast. While men hunted, women gathered, and both men and women fished. However, contact with the British resulted in major changes. Trapping became important after fur trading was introduced. Labrador Inuit became accustomed to European Canadian ways. Now that we have an understanding of Labrador Inuit lifestyles as a community, let's talk about their lifestyles within households and families. Favored by communities, marriages were mostly polygamous, meaning that men had more than one wife. A common domestic unit would consist of a polygamous family or a nuclear family with several other relatives. Labrador Inuit were semi-nomadic. They would spend the winter months in multi-family dwellings, housing up to 20 people, and the warmer months in tents. After contact with the Europeans, Labrador Inuit had been pressured to shift to smaller nuclear family domestic units. Today, Labrador Inuit are mostly settled in a number of villages and towns. In terms of politics, families or regional bands were the basic socio-political units in this region. Older men had leadership in households, and sometimes men who were powerful hunters or shamans were deemed as the leaders. Disputes within communities would be settled by older men through informal village councils. After the Moravian missionaries were introduced, the governing bodies of Labrador Inuit became the elected church councils. The political culture became more professional. Since 1973, the Labrador Inuit Association has fought for Indigenous rights alongside serving as a forum for the discussion of Inuit concerns. Another crucial aspect of recognizing Indigenous concerns in Canada is learning about residential schools. In 2007 and 2008, the Government of Canada faced 5 lawsuits concerning the 4 residential schools in the northern Labrador region. Inuit experienced sexual and physical abuse, assimilation, and pure neglect. Learning about residential schools allows us to become more informed about the experiences of Labrador Inuit and how they were impacted. Residential schools have had horrible long-term effects, and by learning about this topic, we can further foster healing in Inuit communities. Raising awareness and spreading education is crucial for actions of resurgence. Many individuals are uneducated about Inuit identity. Without having a personal connection to the culture, it is difficult to appreciate the practices. I hope that my presentation on Labrador Inuit has helped you learn about Inuit culture as a whole, because as Canadians, educating oneself about the different cultures that represent our country is extremely important.